Ravens are 2 games into the preseason now with 1 left this Friday, roster cuts on Sunday, and there are a handful of players that I don't think people are talking about enough. And I'm not saying all of these guys that we're going to talk about in this video are going to make the 53-man roster. Honestly, with how deep this defense is, some of them are definitely not going to. But every time these guys get an opportunity, they continue to flash. So we're going to talk about 5 different Ravens who have quietly put together a really impressive training camp and preseason so far, and why nobody should be sleeping on them. Let's start with a guy that I think has a more interesting story than most Ravens fans realize, and that is outside linebacker Kaimon Rucker. Rucker was a highly productive 5-year player at North Carolina. He finished his career with 180 tackles, 38.5 tackles for loss, 22 sacks, 29 quarterback hits, and 4 forced fumbles. His 22 career sacks ranked 6th in UNC history. So why wasn't he drafted? Well, injury played a significant part of it. Rucker suffered a cracked fibula during his final UNC season, which ended his year prematurely and kept him from participating in the pre-draft process. The Ravens ended up signing him last year as an undrafted free agent, and he had some preseason production, including a half sack and a fumble recovery versus Dallas last preseason, but he did not make the initial 53. He spent time on Baltimore's practice squad and then was signed to a reserve future contract in January 26. And last Saturday versus the Vikings, Kaimon Rucker led the entire defense with a 90.4 overall PFF grade. He had an 87 pass rush grade. And maybe Kaimon Rucker ends up back on the Ravens practice squad or finds an opportunity with somebody else. I'm not saying that he's going to make the 53. There's a lot of tough defensive decisions that the Ravens are going to have to make this Sunday when they cut down the roster to 53. But Rucker's shining in this preseason, and he has the college production. He has the frame. I mean, this guy is 6'2", 265 pounds, athletic, and really just needed some opportunity, some development, and to stay healthy, to be honest. And I think he is shining this preseason. This is a guy that nobody should be sleeping on. I don't know if he's going to make the 53. There's another guy on this list that we're about to talk about who he's directly competing with, also competing with Adisa Isaac to make the 53. It depends how many outside linebackers the Ravens keep, but Kaimon Rucker is somebody that nobody should be sleeping on. The next guy I want to talk about is not a roster long shot. This is a recent draft pick who I just want to shed some light on because he is shining, and I think he could earn a real role on this Ravens defense. He's going to make the 53, and that is 5th round draft pick Chandler Rivers. He's a smaller corner. He's 5'10", around 185 pounds, played at Duke in college, and had a really productive 4-year career. In 22, he had 52 tackles, 6 pass breakups, an interception. In 23, 58 tackles, 7 pass breakups, an interception. 24, first team All-ACC, third team AP All-American, 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 7.5 tackles for loss. 25, second team All-ACC, 59 tackles, 2 interceptions, 8 pass breakups. Ran a 4.4 40, has a 39-inch vertical. He's extremely athletic, and he plays a lot bigger than his size. He can play outside or nickel, attacks the football as a tackler, and has the ability to blitz as well as cover at a high level. Just in the past preseason game against the Vikings on Saturday, he had an 84.6 overall PFF grade and a 90 coverage grade. He allowed just 6 yards on 5 targets. Chandler's a much different conversation than Kaimon Rucker. Kaimon Rucker is truly fighting for a 53-man roster spot. I think Chandler Rivers has one locked in, being a recent 5th round draft pick and then also seeing how he's been playing in the preseason. But the Ravens are deep at corner. I mean, you have your top 4 that are guaranteed in Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, Chido Awuzie, TJ Tampa. I think Keon Martin and also Chandler Rivers makes it. So that's 6. If the Ravens decide to keep 7 corners, I think Bilal Kone probably has the best chance, but the Ravens are definitely keeping those 6 in my mind. Chandler Rivers has earned a spot, not just because he's a 5th round pick this year, but he is earning this in the preseason. I mean, he is attacking the football, and he was dominant in coverage too. I do not think anybody should be sleeping on Chandler Rivers. This guy is going to be a Raven for years to come and really play a role on this team team because of his versatility. The next guy I want to give some love to is a former teammate of Chandler Rivers at Duke, and that is Aeneas Peebles. Baltimore drafted him last year with 210th pick overall in the 6th round out of Virginia Tech. Aeneas Peebles played his first 4 seasons at Duke and then transferred to Virginia Tech. He's 6 foot, 295, a bit of an undersized interior defensive lineman, but man, he is explosive. His final year at Virginia Tech is a bit better than basic sack totals suggest if you're just looking at stats. He had 29 tackles, 3 sacks, but Virginia Tech reported that through 10 games he had 31 pressures, which ranked first among ACC defensive tackles and 3rd nationally at that position at that point. PFF had him an 88.3 overall defensive grade and a 90.8 pass rush grade. As a rookie in 2025 last year, he appeared in only 6 regular season games, recording 3 tackles and a quarterback hit. Aeneas has been consistently showing up throughout this preseason. He's also fighting for a roster spot. This is a crowded defensive line room, and we'll see if Madubuike ends up initially being on that 53 or if they move him to PUP or something, which would open up another roster spot. If the Ravens are healthy on the defensive line, it is going to be tough, between Rayshawn Benny and CJ Okoye and Aeneas Peebles, Broderick Washington. There's a lot of guys on the back end of that defensive line that are fighting for roster spots, but Aeneas Peebles is doing everything he possibly can to earn one, and I think his explosiveness is extremely underrated. This guy is extremely twitchy and is consistently putting pressure and getting around guys, even with the lack of size. He's an undersized interior defensive lineman, but this guy's getting home. And I know a lot of Ravens fans know who Aeneas Peebles is from last year. We obviously drafted him, but he was inactive for a lot of games last season. And with this new coaching staff, I'm very curious to see how they develop Aeneas Peebles. I don't think you can keep him on the practice squad, so I do have him making the roster, although it being very close because, like I said, this D-line is stacked. On the top end, you got Madubuike if he ends up being healthy and ready to go for the season. You got Travis Jones, Calais Campbell, John Jenkins, Broderick Washington. The Ravens have a lot of depth there, which is a good problem to have, and I think Aeneas Peebles can bring value to this team and be an asset for this team, especially in pass rush situations. This guy is an explosive interior defensive lineman, and can't wait to see him develop over the years. Can't wait to see how this plays out if he does make the roster, but I think that a lot of people need to keep an eye on Aeneas Peebles. This is someone that nobody should be sleeping on. The next guy I want to talk about made some noise last year and continues to thrive this season, and that is Keondre Jackson. Jackson's a 6'2", 215-pound safety coming out of Illinois State as an undrafted free agent in 25. He had a very productive college career, 225 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 5 interceptions, and 13 passes defended over 4 seasons. His senior year was his breakout. He had 99 tackles, 3 interceptions, first team All-MVFC, and AP FCS All-American honors. He initially landed on Baltimore's practice squad last year and then started to get some game day elevations because of his special teams play. If you guys remember last year, Keondre Jackson was one of the best special teams players on this entire Ravens team. Going out there, flying around with a ton of energy, forced a fumble against the Vikings in the regular season last year. Keondre Jackson was one of the shining stars on our special teams. And new special teams coordinator Anthony Levine continues to speak very highly of him. New Ravens defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver continues to speak very highly of him and what he can bring to the field on defense as well. And he's been one of the shining stars in preseason. Keondre's been playing his role perfectly throughout this preseason. He's smart in coverage and he attacks the ball. Wherever the ball is, watch Keondre Jackson coming out of nowhere to lay his body on the line. He constantly is finding the ball. He's disruptive in the run game. He can blitz the quarterback. He's smart in coverage on the back end. The Ravens obviously have Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, and Jalen Hawkins ahead of him on the safety depth chart, but I don't think there's any argument that Keondre is going to be that 4th safety, is going to get in for some defensive snaps, can obviously fill in a bigger role if there's an injury, and he's going to be one of the shining stars, if not the leader on special teams this year. Everybody probably knows who Keondre Jackson is, but I just want to shed a little love and a little light onto Keondre because he is balling this offseason and continues to even expand on what we saw from last year. I love the energy he plays with. I love the physicality he plays with. There's no doubt in my mind that he makes this roster. I just want more Ravens fans to be watching him play and to know his name. And the last guy I wanted to talk about, but definitely not the least, this may be my favorite sleeper story of the offseason, and that is Ethan Ethan Burke, outside linebacker, edge defender, 6'6", 260 plus pounds, played 4 seasons at Texas, went undrafted this year and signed with Baltimore. He went undrafted because a lot of scouts were calling him a tweener. You know, he didn't have the desirable length and traits and aggression. He needed a better bend, a better anchor. He needed refinement as a pass rusher. But Ethan's done nothing but show up throughout the entire training camp, making play after play, every opportunity that he gets, and then he's rolling that over into the preseason. And he's not just excelling at pass rush. He had an 87.8 coverage grade in the preseason game against the Vikings and a sack. And Ethan's not your generational athlete, you know, freaking nature, crazy bend like Mike Green or something, but he just continues to work offensive linemen and get home. He's great with his hands and is consistently putting pressure on the quarterback throughout training camp. He's been a shining star and this preseason, and he's definitely going to make this roster cut interesting. I don't think that he's guaranteed a roster spot by any means. If the Ravens do keep 5 outside linebackers, it is between Kaimon Rucker, who we talked about earlier in this video, Aeneas Isaac still, and then Ethan Burke. I think those are the 3 names fighting for one spot. And from what I've seen throughout this preseason, throughout training camp, his motor, just how he continuously keeps flashing and producing, I think he's earned a spot on this 53. Out of the guys he's competing with, I would choose Ethan Burke right now. I don't think he has the most intangibles out of everybody else when it comes to, you know, on paper athleticism, but he's getting home, man. He's getting the job done. He's clearly a very smart player and understands football, and I think the Ravens can continue to develop him, but you got to get a baller out there, man, when he's balling. You got to keep a guy on a team like this that just continues to produce and flash no matter what. He's clearly a strong competitor. I love everything I've been seeing from Ethan Burke throughout this preseason and offseason, but we'll see how these roster cuts shake out. The final preseason game is this Friday against the Commanders, and then roster cuts are due Sunday at 6 o'clock. We will know the 53-man roster, and it is going to be tough. If you noticed, all 5 of these guys that I talked about in this video are all on defense, some in the same positions and competing against each other like Kaimon Rucker and Ethan Burke. Not all of these guys are going to make the final 53, but I do think that they have all deserved strong consideration. Some of them obviously are probably pretty guaranteed to make it, like Keondre Jackson and Chandler Rivers, but a lot of these guys are truly fighting for a roster spot. And these defensive cuts that the Ravens are going to have to make on Sunday is not going to be easy, man. It is one of the hardest defensive roster predictions I think that we've had to have in years. There is a ton of depth. We obviously know who the top end guys are, but there's so many guys that are consistently producing and making noise. The Ravens have had dominant defensive play through the first 2 games of the preseason. I would not want to make these cuts. I think there are more guys deserving that are going to be able to make the team, but we'll see how it all shakes out. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Who would you keep out of these guys? Which outside linebacker, you know, if any of them do you keep? Maybe you go with an Aeneas Isaac. I don't know what you're thinking. Let me know what your thoughts are with these roster cuts, with how the preseason's been going. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to another episode of Sleeper Ravens. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next week.